is Dr. Jackie, and it's my pleasure to bring a message to you tonight that I think should stir you, and I'm hoping will energize and convince you that you're fit for service and that God has something wonderfully planned for you. Because I believe inside of these earthen vessels, God has invested treasures. But a lot of times we don't see those treasures. It's a discerning eye that looks at us and can see that we're somebody meant for glory. But the title of this message is called The Least Likeliest. And I'm going to start it off just by talking about where we are today. I think that this message is perfectly suited for this time, and particularly just the story about Gideon. But because I think we're in a troubling time now where our comfort zone has been shaken a bit, because we're now looking at a new normal, and we're having to adjust quickly to different shifts that are happening geopolitically. We're looking at different shifts that are happening economically. And people are shaken because they don't know what to expect, because what used to be expected is no longer, right? But God always, in the midst of troubling times, raises up individuals that might feel in and of themselves that they're the least likeliest. Who's the least likeliest? The one that feels like I'm unqualified. I haven't been prepared. I didn't get to go to the best schools, but you're the least likeliest. And here's something that I started to notice about God. God is interested in showing his glory in the things that confound others. He is always historically choosing what we would consider to be the least likeliest to pull off quantum leaps in the realm of the spirit, to do marvelous things that are unspeakable. You put your hand on your mouth and you wonder, where did these people come from? But guess what? When I look at you, that's who I see, a least likeliest. When I look in the mirror as I'm getting dressed every morning, I see a least likeliest. A girl who was the daughter of migrant workers, the second in her family to ever go to university. But guess what? God is famous for choosing the least likeliest. And so I'm going to begin my study just by talking about Abraham. Abraham is where our story begins in the book of Genesis. Abraham was the least likeliest. He was somebody's son, but God spoke to him one day and said, go to a place that I'm going to show you. Now, I'm going to show you this place. You don't know yet, and I'm not giving you any of the details, the least likeliest. But he was to become the father of many nations, right? So we're all the seed of Abraham because of his obedience to become the least likeliest, who became the greatest. So the covenant that God set with Abraham is a covenant that we're living in and enjoying to this day. He was the least likeliest. You know, what's funny is that God first told his father to go, and his father went only as far as to one city, and then they stayed there. And then when God began to speak to Abraham, you know, his father passed away, he picked up his stuff and he left. What I like about that story is it frames the mechanics of faith. A lot of times we want a lot of details. We want God to tell us where to go, when to go, why, who to go with, but that's not what God does. He gives you a big, broad statement. And when you become effective and obedient enough to act on that one statement in that time frame that he's giving you, then he begins to increase your view, and he begins to fill in some of the blank spots. But isn't this the walk of faith? Go to a place that I will show you. I remember when I was out of college and I started my first business, and now I'm almost changing businesses at this time. And I'm wondering, am I to go to Bible school? Am I to continue with my business? What am I to do? And God interrupts my normal with a marriage proposal. And I wasn't even dating anybody, but it was just someone that I had known for years. And so, the least likeliest. Let God interrupt your normal. Believe him when he says how great that you are. And let him begin to shake the nations by the person that he begins to reveal in you, the least likeliest. And so my first candidate that I want to talk about is Gideon. Now, as I mentioned, this is a story that just, it enthralls me every time I read it. Because who was he? He was one of the smallest tribes and one of the smallest clans, least likeliest. More than that, he was afraid. Because let me set the picture. During this time, the Midianites were raiding Israel. And so what they were doing was destroying their crops and things and stealing them, so that the people were literally on the verge of starvation. And they were hiding their food source. And this is where it picks up. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth tree at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, and his son Gideon. Gideon was beating wheat in the wine press instead of on the threshing floor, to hide it and save it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, O brave man." But Gideon said to him, "Please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, then why is all this stuff happening to us?" Now, I have asked that question in my younger days many a times, because I think we believe that if bad things are happening to us, when we say bad things, let's check vocabulary. First of all, God says it's all good. He causes all things to work together for our good. So there's no such thing as bad things. What we want to say is when we are being tested, or we're being tried, right? Or when God is bringing challenges to us. But what we've been taught is that these things mean something negative. But listen, God hides things in darkness. Darkness is meant to show his brilliance. Pain and suffering is meant to sharpen you and to give you stamina and stability. So these things are happening, and Gideon is doing what many of us do. He's saying, well, if God is with us, then why is all this bad stuff happening? A good question, but the wrong conclusion, right? And so he says to him, "And where are all his wondrous works which our fathers told us about, when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and put us into the hand of the Midianites." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this strength of yours and save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" But Gideon said to him, "Please, Lord, how am I to rescue Israel?" He's wondering, I'm the one that's over here in this vineyard here, trying to hide this food that I'm threshing because I'm so afraid. And you're saying that I am supposed to save someone. "Behold," he said, Gideon said to this angel, "Behold, my family is the least significant in Manasseh, and I am the youngest or the smallest in my father's house." And the Lord answered him, "I will certainly be with you, and you will strike down the Midianites as if there were only one man." Gideon replied to him, "If I found favor in your sight, then show me a sign that it is you who speaks with me. Please do not depart from here until I come back to you to bring my offering and place it before you." I want you to listen to this. Even though the Israelites had sinned and they had now been given into the hand of the Midianites, I want you to recognize something. Gideon understood the protocol, the divine protocol on how to approach God. How do we know this? He's interacting with either God or the angel of the Lord. And he knew enough to know that when that angel speaks to you, the way that you have to behave. So he said, "I have to now give you an offering." And so then the angel said, "Go, I'll wait. I'll wait until you return." Then Gideon went and prepared a young goat and unleavened bread from an ephah of flour. And the meat he put in a basket and the broth in a pot. And he brought the food to him under the oak and presented it. And the angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and unleavened bread and lay it on this rock and pour out the broth over it." And so he did. Then the angel of the Lord put out the end of his staff and touched it, and it was consumed, and it consumed up the meat and the unleavened bread. Then the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. When Gideon realized without any doubt that he was the angel of the Lord, he declared, "Oh, no, Lord, for now I've seen the angel of the Lord face to face. I'm going to die." And the Lord said to him, "Peace be to you. Do not be afraid. You shall not die." But Gideon built an altar where the Lord had named it, "The Lord is Peace." To this day is still an Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Again, another funny thing I noticed is that the angel disappeared, but he still heard God speaking to him. That meant that this young man had a relationship with God. He had made room to know God and know the ways of God, of how to deal. What's the protocol on how to approach God, to interact with God? And a lot of times we have lost the fear of God and the reverence of God. And we just think you can come to God any kind of way, and just because it's in your heart, you can do any kind of thing. And not so. There's a direct protocol. We remember that Uriah, as David was moving the Ark of the Covenant out of somebody's backyard, trying to put it in a beautiful place to give reverence to God, He reached up his hand when the cart stumbled and tried to steady it, and he was struck dead. There is a proper way to come to God. God teaches us as men what are his rules on how to come to us. We know that the priests had a special dress that they had to prepare. They just couldn't go in the presence of the Lord. They had to prepare to go in the presence of the Lord. They had to have a certain garb on. And now we're seeing the mixing of different culture. And yeah, I'm going there. There's different culture. We have popular culture now integrating into the church. Is it proper? No. Most of the time it is not. Why? As long as it does not offend or cross any of the protocol that God requires on how to approach him. Now, you can't be up there cussing and singing lewd and lascivious music and then be talking about, now I want to go sing praise and worship. You can do it, but you really should have reverence for God, a fear of God, where you want to offer him something holy because he is holy. So what do? We make our vessels holy as we're offering this holy worship unto him. So, I had somebody ask me about that. Like, is it wrong if, a stripper or a rapper or somebody else? I think you have to ask that question. Did they do it in a holy fashion unto a holy God? Did they prepare their vessel to do that? And that is proper protocol. And so what I love is it says that now on the same night, the Lord spoke to Gideon again. And this is what he says. Take your father's bull, the second bull, 7 years old, and tear down the altar of Baal, this fake god that belongs to your father, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it, and build an altar to the Lord your God on top of this mountain stronghold with stones laid down in an orderly way. So he's telling him there's a way that you have to build this, just like he told him how to lay that bread and that meat down so that it could be properly consumed by God as an offering. We just can't do it any way that we want. So now he's telling them, when you tear this altar down, I want you to build another altar on that same place. What is that? God is talking about a power shift. He's taking a power source that was belonged to occultic worship. And he's saying, tear it down. But on top of that place now, I want you to build an altar to me, to God the Most High. And you're to build it according to my protocol, to my standards. And so he tells them how to lay the stones in this orderly way. And then he says, now take the second bull and offer burnt sacrifice using the wood of the Asherah, which you shall cut down. Then Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did just as the Lord told him. But because he was too afraid of his father's household, relatives, and the men of the city to do it during daylight, he did it at night. Two things. He was obedient. He understood the protocol of God, but he did it afraid. So God says that you're a great man. So that means that it's not whether we're afraid, it's whether we allow fear to paralyze us. His fear didn't stop him. He did it afraid. I do many things afraid, but because I believe that there's a better outcome. And if I can just get through, I believe that I trust that the promise of God is sure. That if I just do what he's asking for, there is a reward and a payoff. The biggest reward is just the satisfaction that you know that you were obedient and that you did what God asked you to do. And so this is Gideon. I love the power structure, the change of power, the shift of power. So it shows the things that we do on earth have a spiritual connotation to them. So tearing down this false altar and building the altar of God on it, it shifted power back to God, and it gave an atmosphere. It created an atmosphere where the people were really able to now shift and turn to God, because it destroyed those touch points of occultic powers that were in that city. So God was already using this man. He was the least likeliest. And God used him not just to deliver the Midianites, but started off by shifting power in the atmosphere over that city by destroying those occultic touch points, those altars, he tore down. And every time that he came up against opposition, God was there to deliver him. Gideon, the least likeliest. But here we can talk about someone else. We can talk about even how Cain and Abel, how Cain was drunk with jealousy and he struck his brother and killed him, That's a horrible thing. He was the least likeliest maybe of evil, but you could see from his story that he did not follow God. He did not follow the protocol of God. Because the reason why he was mad and killed his brother was because he refused to follow the protocol, the way that God wants you to approach him. Now listen, you go to England and you want to see the Queen, there's a protocol. There's a dress that you have to have, everything when you approach the Queen. There are rules about, can you touch her? Do you talk to her first? All of those things. If you go to see the President of the United States of America, there is a protocol. I've been to the White House a couple times. There's protocol. They're gonna vet you. You have to go through these paperwork that you have to have approved. There's protocol. And so I think that the story about Gideon shows, yes, he was the least likeliest, but he was also informed. He knew his God. He had a relationship with God that enabled him to approach God and to begin to move. Abraham, an amazing father of all nations, who just heard a command from God, and though he didn't seem to be endued with anything special from the outward appearance, was able to move forward. But now let's talk about another one that was just amazing to me, which is Joseph. The story of Joseph is really incredible because Joseph wasn't anybody that great. He was the second to the youngest, so he didn't have the first birthright as being the firstborn or anything like that. But for some reason, God saw something in this child, and his father saw it. And so his father favored him and his youngest brother. And as a matter of fact, his father gave him this coat of many colors. And I guess because the siblings saw that the dad favored him, they were really kind of jealous. And they didn't like him whatsoever. And they were upset about it. And so it goes on to say that Joseph now is helping his father in the family business. He has an administrative gift. Remember this. He was able to help to run things, bring structure and order. He had an administrative gift. And so it says that one night he has a dream. He has these couple of dreams. And in the dream, he sees that he's going to rise up to be like the ruler, the greatest of his family, and that the rest of them, even his father, is going to bow down to him. And so his brothers really got upset about that. Even his dad did. What kind of dream is this? But he knew that it was a dream from God. And so he shared it with his brothers, and that just pushed them over the edge. They were like, you know what? He has got to go. So the next thing we know is that his father sends him to check on the brothers in the field. When they see him coming, they decide, we're going to just kill him. We're done with him. And so they decide that that's what they're going to do. But as they decide that, Judah decides, you know what? I don't think we should kill him. He hears these slave drivers coming, and he says to himself, you know what? Let's not kill him. Let's sell him into slavery, and we'll just say that he was, torn to pieces by some animal and that he's dead. And that's what they did. So now you see the dynamic. So the Egyptians are these slave drivers, and they're coming and they're picking up, they picked up Joseph. And when they pick him up, they take him to Egypt. The Israelites and the Egyptians did not get along. They didn't really like or esteem one another, right? Very different cultures and different customs and things like that. So now he finds himself a slave in Egypt. And he's given to Potiphar, who's a dignitary in Egypt. And so something is seen in this child because Potiphar starts to give him more and more responsibility, and because he's starting to see this administrative gift that Joseph has, to the point where he finally puts everything that he owns under the charge of Joseph. He has an administrative gift. The Bible says that your gifts shall bring you before great men, kings even. It's the gifts. God says that in these earthen vessels, we have treasures invested in us. The thing about life is figuring out what has God invested in us. But it's usually wise people that have eyes to see and ears to hear that can look at us and see the gifting, the greatness that God has put on the inside. Not everybody can. That's why you don't need to be hanging around with just any kind of everyone. You need people that see the greatness in you and then want to develop it. So they'll begin to put a demand on you for your greatness. They'll start to demand that you do more and that you become greater. You'll even see that mentors will come into your life to develop the least likeliest. Now, how will you know when God sends a mentor? When a mentor comes, they tend to make you feel incapable. You feel a little bit uncomfortable. They're not people that you feel very comfortable around. So if you're measuring who you're supposed to be with, whether you feel comfortable or not, that is not the sign of a mentor. You might feel incapable. Sometimes they're a bit rough. So if you're given to tone and to, you're very sensitive like that, you got to be careful, because it'll be easy for you to miss what God is trying to lead you to. Because these people don't often have a soft grip. If you read the scripture, even Jesus, he did not bite his tongue. He did not dress up anything. You brood of vipers. I mean, he's calling people, he's telling it like it is. And so if you start to look at, the Bible talks about righteous judgment. Righteous judgment is not judging by the seeing of the eye or the hearing of the ear. In other words, it's not judging by man's standards, by the carnal man. It's judging by the Spirit, righteous judgment. So righteous judgment when you have been tested in a place and you have passed the test. Now the scripture that says that you're able to remove the log from your eye so you can see clearly how to remove the speck from someone else's. Now you're able to judge because you've been through that and you've passed the test, and you know how it is that you can help someone else that's on their journey. But at any rate, we see that Joseph is now over Potiphar's house. What happens is one day, Potiphar's wife looks at him and says, that boy looks good. She goes to him and tells him, let's lay together. And he said, no, absolutely not. How could I do that to Potiphar, who's been so good to me? And so he refuses. She goes and tells everybody that he tried to rape her, rips off his garment and everything and says, see, he tried to, abuse me and da, 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 da. Now, Joseph goes from the family business to slavery in Potiphar's house. Now he's in prison, awaiting judgment and execution. While he's in prison, though, that administrative gift starts to show up. So the person that's in charge of the jail starts to give him duties and lets him begin to run the prison. While he's there, he meets two people, a baker and a butcher. One of them's going to be put to death. And so there's a dream, and he interprets the dream. And it's true. He tells them, so listen, please don't forget me, and please let the Pharaoh know about me. Time passes. I guess he never remembered. Joseph is still in prison. One night, the Pharaoh has a dream. If you see this theme, there's a recurring theme. Joseph has his dreams. Then we see the butcher and the baker. And now Pharaoh himself has a dream. And in this dream, he sees these things that he believes are going to happen, but he doesn't understand. But he knows that it's a dream from God. And so he starts to look for the magicians that can give him the interpretation. There's something about a dream that comes from God. It's different. It leaves an indelible impression on you. So when you awaken, you know that you experienced something. The only two kinds of dreams that I've ever remembered really pretty much in detail is usually a nightmare and a dream from God. And a dream from God is different because it doesn't evoke fear. Even though you might be going through something fearful, you know that there's a message there, and it's for you to try to figure that message out. So here he is looking for these magicians to help him to understand this dream. And he also knows, because he expresses, that this is a dream from God. And so what we see happens is that Joseph is still in prison. He doesn't know what's happening, but the Pharaoh gets upset that no one's coming up with this interpretation. And so they're all going to be put to death. And that's when the butcher remembered, and he mentioned him, and they brought Joseph up. And so Joseph prayed until he got the understanding of the dream. And so he begins to tell the Pharaoh now, so this is what I got. My God, he's making sure he understands. There's a God called Great Jehovah, and this is the interpretation of the dream. The dream was sharing with the Pharaoh that a great famine is coming over the land. And if it weren't for what God is giving him, everybody would perish. So he said, God is going to give you plenty for 7 years. And then following those 7 years is going to be 7 years of famine. So you're to store up all this excess over those 7 years of plenty so that you will have a lot and you will be able to be sustained. And so this is what the Pharaoh said. He says to Joseph, since God has made known all of this to you. There is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all of my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's finger. And that signet ring is how they executed laws and legislation, right? He dressed him with robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He made him ride in a chariot as his second in command. And the people shouted before him, make way. Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift a hand or foot in all of Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph a new name. He gave him his Egyptian name. And he let him also take the daughter of Potiphar as his wife. Now that's poetic justice. He gets Potiphar's daughter as his wife, and now he's second in command. The least likeliest. The least likeliest to me is not only a person that might feel like they're living with the imposter syndrome. They don't feel like they're qualified. They don't feel like they're prepared enough, but God has selected them. And then he begins to open up the treasures that he's hidden inside of them so that they can see that all along, they were always chosen and selected for this very purpose and for this very time. His destiny was to save his family. Jacob, Israel, who had the 12 tribes of Israel. So because his brothers sold him into slavery, thank God they didn't kill him, because they would have killed themselves, because he made a way for them. And this is the God that we serve, who makes a way where there seems not to be a way. God that opened doors that men have closed, but cannot remain shut, because if God wants them open, they will be open. I want to say to you this one thing. There are many things that you might have to suffer, but it's not because God is not with you. It's not because you did anything wrong. Could it be that God is just preparing you? He's making sure that you have the muscles and the strength that you need, that you learn the lessons, and that you get the wisdom and the understanding that's necessary for you to take charge and to lead. I believe that the challenges that we go through are in preparation for our next. The least likeliest. I believe God has chosen everyone under the sound of my voice as the least likeliest. It's up to you now to figure out what is your sphere of influence. Where is the land or the realm that God has asked you to serve in so that you can rise up as the least likeliest? You might have been divorced, but God is causing you to be the anchor to build strength and stability in your family. You might be somebody that was raped or molested. You might be somebody that your father did not approve of, but yet God chose you. You're the least likeliest. And he's given us these men as examples so that we can see in the storylines ourselves and understand that it's God that qualifies. Listen, promotion comes from God. I don't care what you want to be or what you want to do. It's God that brings promotion. You can get there two ways, trying on your own and trying to make your own way, or you can let God begin to unfold the gifting and the treasures that are on the inside of you and let him put you in these places, but you got to be willing to do it by faith. Abraham heard a word, go to the place that I will show you. Are you willing to go without all the details? Are you willing to stay in a place where it looks as if you're forsaken, but still trust God? One of my favorite passages that just wowed me this year was when I looked at the story of Job. After that man lost everything he had, he lost all of his children, he lost his servants, he lost his money, he lost everything. It says when they came and gave him all of that news of all these things that he lost, it says he bowed down and worshiped God. He bowed down and worshiped God. I'm like thinking to myself, who does that? But the real question that I was asking is, would I do that? Because he understood, shall I accept good from God and not bad also? We have a terminology when we say bad. What we mean is things that challenge us or cause pain. But everything is good with God. It's all good with God. That's why he says all things work together. Not some, all for those that love him and are called according to his purpose. So if he allows it, it's because it's for your building, for your making. It's a setup so that you can become the least likeliest. With that, I say thank you for listening.